Thank you for joining Caroline Stockmann, ACT Chief Executive, and me, Anne Hogarth, ACT's Director of Marketing and Communications, for this presentation on the newly released results of the ACT's Business of Treasury Survey 2021.
Yes, thank you very much for joining us. This annual research study is critical to our understanding of the underlying Treasury trends and the big issues for treasurers. Of course, this year the research focuses on changes through the pandemic. But how will that affect the future direction of treasurers' working lives, the position of Treasury within organisations and the future of Treasury?
The Business of Treasury research has now been running for 9 years. And in that time, it's built up a really valuable picture of how Treasury is evolving. This year's research was conducted over 4 weeks in February and March, and 180 treasurers around the world took part. They used a mixture of online and telephone responses to respond to this in-depth survey. And we were able to speak to a really good representation of Treasury roles, including senior treasurers. 45% of our respondents were leading the Treasury function in their organisations. So Caroline, what were the biggest changes in the areas that this research has benchmarked previously?
Well, Anne, interestingly, the fundamentals of Treasury are not changing significantly in 2021. Indeed, the focus on capital and liquidity management is increasing, although last year it was expected to decline this year. And the reasons for this, I guess, are clear, as in March 2020, it became all about liquidity, and liquidity. Funnily enough, though, treasurers again anticipate spending less time on capital and liquidity management next year. In fact, only 10% of treasurers expect an increased focus on liquidity. And this suggests that the majority of treasurers again feel that their current attention level is sufficient or should in fact be reducing. It's the other way around with business strategy, however, where treasurers are spending less time than they anticipated. And that's a slight worry, and we'll come back to that a little bit later. Time spent on technology was also the other way around. That is, less time was spent here than anticipated. And where time was spent, the focus was on working from home capabilities versus, for instance, large transformational projects. On the next slide, we can see in terms of funding, bank finance is on the decline, while working capital improvements are increasing. And we do notice some differences regionally, with UK treasurers looking more commonly to debt capital markets and working capital being a greater focus for the rest of the world. For 31% of total respondents, supply chain finance has become more prominent during COVID-19. In terms of coming to the people side of things, treasurers do expect their team size to increase, which bucks the trend of the past few years. A higher proportion of large organisations, which will naturally be more significantly impacted by technology efficiencies, expect to decrease their team size, however, whereas 97% of small companies predict the same or an increased team size.
And looking at the pandemic, Caroline, what were the headline findings there?
As you'll see, and I'll pause on this next slide for the audience to have time to read through a selection of these interesting quotes. But you'll see here, in general, our community is working in a rich diversity they are working in a rich diversity of organisations. Some are worried they don't have enough resource. Others are actively planning for growth, and yet others see restructuring and a decline in team size due to their particular environment. Such a lot has changed over the last 12 months for them. And here we see that treasurers seem to enjoy working in diverse teams, and they've appreciated the support of their employer over the last year in particular. Treasurers also do feel that they can bring their whole self to work, but there's a statistically non-significant decline in how well they feel their team works together. But as I say, statistically non-significant, so not something we're going to worry about at the moment. And then in terms of work and life patterns, We see a number of paradoxes and quite polarised views, Anne, coming through over the past year. We see that treasurers miss physical interactions, yet the more formalised virtual meetings do keep to time and they do allow personal flexibility. Commuting time can be used for something else, or something better even, yet the line between home and work is becoming blurred, and that is a concern.
So is there a link here to the way that technology is developing for Treasury?
Well, treasurers say that technology and automation remain important concerns for their organisation, but that seems to have dipped a little after a small spike in level of concern in 2020. It's noticeable that younger treasurers and those from ethnic minorities are more focused on technology than others. And some 95% of those who've worked in Treasury for less than 5 years, 94% of those under 35, and 91% of treasurers from minority ethnic groups were particularly concerned about automation. There's actual acceleration in technology investment overall due to the pandemic, a large part of it being around the transition to working from home, as I mentioned earlier. In terms of, if we can stand back a little bit and look at some of the questions around personal development, the need to develop leadership and strategic skills still remains the biggest barrier to career advancement for treasurers, that they do tell us. And the need for these skills increases as treasurers progress through their careers. So that is, it reflects again on how we've made that quite a focus of our qualifications and our various interactions and continuing professional development activities with our treasurers.
Absolutely, and we'll come on to that a little bit later.
We will indeed. So we've focused on leadership and strategic skills in recent years at the ACT, as I said, through our educational offerings, as well as other opportunities for learning, such as virtual conferences like this annual conference, and also through our written content. Once you have the fundamental technical treasury skills under your belt, it's leadership and strategic skills that really differentiate you as an individual. So we can see here in this slide that our UK members are particularly focused on the ACT for this holistic approach to learning, and you can also see a little bit about how they generally do learn and where they get their learning from. On the next slide, we can see that this year's survey reveals an important divergence when it comes to strategy, which we touched on earlier. While boards are engaging with treasurers on a strategic level, they're looking for treasurers for impact on input on capital and liquidity management, followed by risk management and business strategy. Many treasurers have less time to spend on strategy, in fact. So business strategy has dipped, therefore, in terms of the time spent over the past year. And that bucks an upwards trend and is worrying if it continues. But casting our eyes forward, treasurers will have to make up for lost time to retain their place at the strategic decision-making table. That said, the profile treasurers have received over the past year can indeed only help. Despite the limited time available, 39% of treasurers feel that they've been working more closely with their board. 58%, however, say they've experienced no change. We also see that the value of the treasurer as a strategic business partner to the rest of the business continues to rise. It's now at an all-time high of 92%. This year's survey also threw up an intriguing and unprompted finding around trust, as you can see here from some of these quotes we've got from our respondents. A significant number of treasurers said that they felt more trusted or they had learned to trust their team better. Relationships have been enhanced through COVID, it seems, but people are still missing being together. And in terms of what keeps treasurers awake at night, fewer of them reported professional and business challenges this year, interestingly. Staffing, people management, and automation remain the biggest challenges, continuing the trend from 2020. COVID-19 became the primary external concern for treasurers in 2021, of course. Internally, mental health came to the fore. Reassuringly, treasurers have a little more confidence in their leadership's ability to deal with new challenges this year. However, we're seeing more concern about learning and development, as this either gets put on the back burner or just hasn't been possible for one reason and another. Many of those reasons we're familiar with, of course. Leadership abilities and learning were, in fact, of higher concern outside the UK than in the UK. And stigmas around mental health, fortunately, have reduced, which is great news, with 60% of treasurers feeling that the pandemic has influenced this positively. But there's still a way to go to remove those stigmas entirely. Some treasurers feel that enough isn't being done and that leadership is sometimes just paying lip service to the matter.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Well, the research clearly identified learning and development needs as Treasury moves forward. If you're not already aware of it, a good place to start in answering these needs is the ACT's Competency Framework. This underpins everything that the ACT provides to support treasurers. The competencies are grouped into business, behavioural and technical skills, and they're mapped to tactical, operational, managerial and strategic job functions, as well as to the qualifications relevant to those levels. So it's easier to identify and get the skills and knowledge that you really need. You can read more about the ACT Competency Framework on our website at treasurers.org.
Yes, it's really worth a good look at that framework, and it's probably too much to absorb here,
Yes.
but you can see the layout on the screen now, and you can drill down online and to really understand it. It was developed by treasurers for treasurers, of course, and it's an invaluable tool for any Treasury professional.
Absolutely. And as well as formal qualifications, the ACT also provides a wealth of support for treasurers, including training and events such as this one. Our website hosts technical information and resources for business and behavioural skills, as well as new content such as Caroline's Strategic Insights podcast series.